people know that there's a pod today?
You know.
All right, hello everybody, and welcome to our annual end of the season recap episode. We got a great little round table group right here. So I don't have everything queued up automatically since this is a special episode. So I've got the social out on Twitter right now. So if you could please do retweet that so we can get as many people joining us as possible. I'm going to send it out on Discord right now. But we're going to be having... Got a few people in the chat, gives people time to join us as well, but I think you guys are gonna like it. This is good. I'm looking forward to this episode. Let's see here. You guys can continue to chat. You were so chatty beforehand.
I'm sorry.
Well,
We're used to being so
now we're live.
That's right. Well, I gotta do the social. Usually I just have a button on the stream deck to send this out.
Don't say anything that Reed will have to edit.
And I've already got the recording started. It's all great.
Hey, Ranch, where's the rolled in jersey, man? What's up with this DC gear?
Hey. It's coming. Eventually.
Yeah.
It might,
Yeah,
maybe it'll be
we
a
gotta
next
make it happen.
thing.
We gotta make it happen.
Yeah. I haven't been able to get it signed, you know?
Imagine that.
You should.
Rolled in jersey, you know.
Cool. All right. Well, we've got the social out there. So, hey, Jeff, what's going on? Typical Skylar. What, winning everything and collecting his headhunting behind him? Is that the typical Skylar?
Yeah, I've gotta add the Austin FC banner this season.
There you go.
Yeah, you should be wearing an Austin FC shirt.
Look out, Charlotte.
Yeah, it's coming. I actually won I was in some Galaxy Supporters League. They're offering a jersey and a trophy, so
Ooh.
Wow.
that's on the way. You'll see that up there.
Uh-oh.
And next
Uh-oh.
one,
Here we go.
preseason 2022.
Oh man.
Well, all right. Well, we have got the social out there. So, again, please do retweet that if you can and give us a like on YouTube. It does help. It's funny. I started this mostly to get the audio for the podcast, and we've picked up a fairly decent couple hundred people who subscribe on YouTube. So, yeah, please do like and share and send that out. It helps the algorithm, which I never thought was something I'd be saying for the little niche community that we have. But yeah, do that, and we are going to do our intro for our 2021 season recap. Here we go. Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the MLS Fantasy Insider, our recap of the 2021 fantasy season. This episode is brought to you by winning at TQL Stadium. At least someone local finally did it. No. Sorry. Actually, brought to you by the amazing Patreon supporters of MLS Fantasy Insider and MLSFantasyBoss.com. I'm your host, Reed Connolly from MLS Fantasy Boss, and tonight I'm joined by our co-hosts, my partners in fantasy, if you will, Blaine Riffle and Ashley Savage. We'd also like to welcome our special round table of fantasy guests, Skylar Redpath from MLS, Tyler Norman from Discord, and Ryan Anderson, aka MLS Fantasy Stats on Twitter. How is everyone doing tonight?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
One last hurrah.
Yeah.
Are you going last this time, Blaine?
Yeah, I'm going last this time.
just to have it all just come full circle. Well, great. Thanks for coming and joining us, guys, tonight. For those of you who may be listening for the first time, every year we have a recap episode here with MLS Fantasy Insider where we get a small group of people who come on to talk about our general reactions to the 2021 season. There is a survey that I sent out. The easiest way to get that, I mean, it's been on Discord, it's been on Twitter, but if you head over to MLSFantasyBoss.com right now, it's one of, if not the top article, and you can fill out to provide your feedback, one about the official game, because Skylar is going to make sure that gets to MLS so that they can see feedback directly from the players, but also gives you a chance to provide some feedback to me and the MLS Fantasy Insider team about the product that we produce and the articles and Discord and everything that's out there, part of the MLS Fantasy Boss Network. So anybody who wants to go in still and complete that, really appreciate it. It helps a lot because we want to try to produce content that you want to listen to. So yeah, let's do a little bit. I know we've seen all of these guys on the show at least once throughout the season, but just before we go any further, I want to talk about the credentials of the people who we have with us tonight. Everybody is a top fantasy player. Of course, we have Skylar, one of the greats of fantasy of all time. Overall rank this year 36, 2,482 points. We also have Tyler from our Discord channel. If you are over there hearing about the big compendium of injuries and call-ups and all that, that is something that Tyler has spent a lot of work on this year. Overall rank for him 41, 2,477 points. And he has a note that says he had a bad last week, and I know he's particularly grumpy about second assists. And then finally, we have Ryan, who is with us frequently in the chat, and also you see him on Twitter, MLS Fantasy Stats. Overall rank 9, 2,538 points. He stands atop of us all here on the show. So that's who we have talking tonight. And of course, the three of us from MLS Fantasy Insider who are joining with you pretty much every Monday-ish throughout the season. But yeah, this is who we have talking about the season. And I want to first, let's just get this out of the way because sometimes it's up in the air. But we've got Skylar here. So can we expect to maybe see a game in 2022?
You got to put me on the spot right off.
The big question. It's the big. I mean, if the answer is no, it's like, well, thank you so much for listening and good luck.
I'm out of here. On the egg, I'm on face.
3 podcast done.
Yeah, right. Let's get the drum roll going. But no, yeah, we definitely can confirm that we're gonna have a game in 2022. Spoken briefly with the director of digital experience, Cole Slutton, and he's actually a fan of the podcast. He's checked it out. He said he's listened a couple times, and a big fan of just MLS fantasy in general. And so, yeah, everybody can breathe a collective sigh of relief that we will be having a game again next season. So, good to go there.
And of course, the fun question that is always accompanying confirmation that there will be a game is, but what's going to change? So before we get there, I know that's been a great part. People have submitted their feedback with the survey about what they didn't like and did like and what they might hope for changes. Some are way out there, some are pretty reasonable. But first, let's just talk. We had a few changes to the game this year, very minor, mostly in how calculations were made with player values and changes and things like that. But we had a few changes this year. What could we expect to see? Sorry, I'm butchering this question. Let's start over. Reed. I wanted to say that we had a few changes, and the biggest of those changes were we had 2 longtime MLS employees leave who have been very passionate about fantasy. We had Ben Bear, who left during the downsizing, and then we had James Ballo, who left us for another opportunity. And so definitely think about those guys and all the hard work and want to say thank you to them for everything they did. But besides them leaving and some of the minor changes, we'll start out with you, Skylar. Just open forum after that. How pleased were you with the game this year and its overall success?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think overall, I think the game I'd consider it a success. Definitely some obstacles, like you mentioned, with Ben Bear and James Ballo gone. I mean, they both played a big part in driving the game and kind of keeping the ship afloat, so to speak. And so once it was clear that they were moving on, then MLS was pretty quick to reach out to me, and I assumed a little bit more responsibility as far as just like the gameplay and game oversight, that kind of thing. And I mean, yeah, it was definitely a bit of a transition with all that happening in season. But both Ben and James, I mean, they kind of helped set me up to where it was pretty smooth passing of the torch, so to speak. And so, yeah, I mean, just talking to some of the guys at MLS, Cole and some of the other guys, I think they're pleased with how the season played out. On the same note, I'd probably say, I think the league does recognize that there's room for improvement, and we want to generate some of that excitement and some more participation just around the game in general. And so, feedback from the community is welcome. Just like you're doing with the survey, I mean, all that stuff is great information, and I'm looking forward to kind of bouncing some ideas off of the team and seeing how we can continue to grow the game and just the product across the board. So I'm happy with the way things played out, and hopefully everybody else is in the same boat.
Yeah, open forum to everybody else here. Feel free to jump in. What did you all think about just your general takeaways? Right, the season's freshly over. What do you think of it?
I mean, I'll jump in, and I know we had James for part of the season, and then Skylar took over, but I just love how accessible MLS was to us this year, especially through Discord. It was a little bit more of a private channel to them, but we're public on Twitter. We were offering to let people tweet at us, and we would relay the information, and we did on multiple occasions. And I love that accountability. And with Skylar here, we want to say a big thank you. Another big thank you to James, who's not with us anymore on this. He's still around Discord. I think he still plays a little bit. But just a big thank you to the MLS side for reaching out or being available to us and letting us give some feedback. I think that's been huge. Player updates throughout the year as players weren't added on time or got missed in the system, or didn't get transferred teams when they actually transferred teams in MLS in the app. It was just there were some technical glitches on the back end, which I know somewhat out of MLS's control, but the availability to get those corrected quickly was there most of the time, and we appreciate that as fans and players. And I just appreciate that's one of the big takeaways I had from this year. Otherwise, I thought the game went really well. I don't like the variable team budget. I like it fixed myself, but I think going into it this year, knowing how the player prices changed, we couldn't game the system quite so much. Everybody was on a more level playing field this year. So even though that's not my preferred way to play, I think it went a whole lot smoother to start the season this year because everybody knew what to expect and everybody was kind of able to game the system in the same manner and try to increase their team value roughly comparable to each other, rather than a few people getting lucky, finding out what the system is going to do, and then being able to exploit it for massive gains early on. So I think that rule is better the way now that we know what's going on, and I think it's going to be more competitive going forward. Not my preferred, but I'm okay with it, and I think next year we'll see a lot less variance in those top teams to start the season because I think we've all figured out how to make that work going forward.
Anybody else? Does everybody agree?
I don't agree with fixed budgets, but I'll agree with most of the things.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the nitty-gritties for disagreements, but just in general, were you happy?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll just add to, I mean, to echo what Blaine said, I mean, the Discord community, just the community in general, was super helpful for me, especially, I mean, just reaching out and saying, hey, this guy's switched teams, and just anything that might have been missed along the way. People were just willing to jump in and help out, and that was much appreciated. I mean, definitely helped just throughout the season. I mean, helped kind of keep things moving, and that was huge. So I think that just kind of speaks volumes of the community and just everybody out there willing to help one another out. Not just, obviously everybody wants to win and do well, but at the same time, people are willing to jump in and just keep things moving. So that was really cool.
Yeah, and it is a really great group. I know we had some probably lower numbers this year than we have in the past, and that's just to kind of be expected. I think a lot of this was a rebuilding year for MLS. I know we had a lot of feedback about advertising, a lot of feedback about team involvement, and I think, again, this was sort of almost restarting a lot of efforts after the big COVID hit from 2020, and so it's understandable somehow fantasy might have been a little bit lower on the priority, but still, I was really happy with the implementation of the Champions League. I know we got just a little taste of that last year, but to really see it play out in the full season, I thought was great. I thought that went a long way to making it approachable to people at any point of the game. I liked that element when we had the 2-season format. I thought that was a good way to try to make it approachable, but splitting up into 4 chunks made it even more so of how if you missed the start, you could jump in at the quarter, the third, the fourth, and still have some level of competitiveness. We'll get more into budgets and values later on, but I really thought that worked well with the Champions League and was happy to see people respond well to it in the survey. that we sent out. But yeah, in general, I enjoyed it. I tend to enjoy it regardless of what's going on. I just kind of roll with the waves and the changes, and I kind of find fun in all of that. But no, I really did think this went smooth, and I was glad this was a year that had very few changes, so we could really get a good taste of this provider, this system, and decide where we need to go to from there. Well, let's talk about some. We'll get into the specifics in just a second, but just in general, real quick, any like high level, what would you like to see change for 2022 from anybody? Ryan, I know you've got a laundry list, which I was really happy to. I was happy to go through that. But just like some general just things of like one thing that you really hope to see change for 2022.
I would love. I really like the fixed budget. Like, I'm okay with the price value variations, but I really like the fixed budget. Maybe it's because I'm the differential guy. I love differentials, and I'm good at finding those out of nowhere. But yeah, I personally would prefer the fixed budget next season.
You're like the opposite of me. I'm the I like fixed budget, but that's more just because I tend to primarily stick with chalk like the entire year. And it worked out for me this year. So
yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's a reason why for some of them are so good. I mean, I know one thing for me is I think this probably touches on a lot of what I like. I was in the same mindset of you in a lot of ways, Ryan, as sort of the UI interface for some of the data of a. I've wanted this for years because it was in an older version of the MLS Fantasy game, like a dashboard, and when you log in to be able to see some of the top performing leagues, some of the top performing players, the fantasy players, captain picks and things like that. Just a nice little dashboard of some information that when you first see it, I really would love to see like a little splash dashboard when we first came in to help make some of that. And even score touching on, I know some of the things you talked about, Ryan, the top 100 team average, top 1,000 team average, things like that. I think could be cool. Little bits, places like that on a little dashboard. But that's something I would love to see, which I think is very provider based and maybe not something easily done from MLS. But that's something I would love to see.
I always think of that when we talk during the week too, and I know it's kind of something that you're briefly saying, but I know it would be probably very difficult from an interface perspective, but I would love when you do that owned by to have an additional like detail to that, if that makes sense, because you're right, like I'm not trying to just copy what everybody else is doing, but that particular stat is like the most incorrect stat, I feel like, right? Like there were times when Walker Zimmerman was like a red and he was still the quote most owned player. And obviously some of us mess with that. Like I think a lot of us picked up Iko Para as a scrub for a good part of the year. So like he's highly owned, but that's not real. But, again, I know it would be hard because you'd have to have a way to realize.
Also dead teams.
Yeah, the dead teams mess it up. Or just
would be that's the big factor right now, I think, is dead teams in that side of things. So
and again, I know asking for that is probably impossible, and I'm content to not have it, but I would love to see a version of percent owned by in a more accurate reflection of people who are still playing, or like you said, with like top 10 teams, or people who've already qualified for Champions League, or something that might be easier to calculate. I don't know if people who do place in top teams would love that, because it kind of shows your hand if you have to lock a team early or whatever. But just generally, that's a stat that I feel like had been more accurate before, but maybe we just got a lot of dead teams this year, or I'm not sure, but something along that would be great.
Yeah, I think without making too many wholesale changes, just changing that from percentage owned to like percentage change in the rostered stat. I know NFL does that a lot.
You mean like dropped or added?
Yeah, dropped or added. Just do it a percentage added. And if they go from being on 100,000, or we got what? If they're on 1,000 teams and we've got 10,000 players in there,
Yeah.
If that immediately jumps to 6,000 teams,
Mhm.
there's been a big jump. If that jumps to 1,000 teams and we're only got 1,000 active players,
Yeah.
we can still see that it's basically doubled in ownership.
Yeah, EPL does that too, right? Most
Transfers in,
province.
transfers out.
Yeah, in and out. And we don't necessarily need an out because we're changing everything every week. It's just where are they coming in from and go from there.
Yeah.
I think there's ways we can do that. I could see just my computer background comes in, says active rosters that have made a change this week. You have to register a submit, and it's just a flag on the account, true or false. Have you made a change on your roster this week? If that's true, we run all of our calculations only on what rosters say true. Now, if you wait till Saturday with kickoff to make any changes, of course, you're going to be sitting flagged false, but that's going to change your numbers. But the closer you get to kickoff, the more accurate that's going to be. But that's just a quick flag on every account. Have they made a change this week and submitted it? And then we can only calculate those percent owned by for active teams that have made a change this week. It at least gives you something. It gives you kind of a rough estimate. It won't be everybody who owns them, but if they're not making changes, then what does it matter?
Yeah, and we'll hit some of let's just jump right into the actual survey feedback now, because we're starting to touch on some of these issues, and I wanna dig down into some of these questions.
I think I have one more.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
Just my big one, I think.
Yeah.
That is more of a game changer than it is a tweak, which is what a lot of what I sent was. And that is, a lot of people have asked some of us who have hit more of the top positions how the heck we do it. And honestly, the switcheroo is a primary strategy. It's one of the biggest strategies that we use, I think. And, or at least one of the more effective ones. And I know that there are some fantasy sports that do like best ball or something like that, where you just kind of set a lineup and then you just kind of get the best scores out of it. And I know that a lot of people are opposed to that because it doesn't take as much strategy as much as it is just picking players who might go off, What I propose is that we would build in the switcheroo into the mechanics of the game. In that, right now we have to find scrub players. The switcheroo, I think, was intended to be it was built off of the mechanism to say, well, if you aren't able to look at your team and see, let's say somebody doesn't start and then the player subs in, but I think that it's a unique aspect of this game that we could really lean into to say, this is something that I don't see in any other fantasy sports out there. You can maybe select a player and call them a scrub or come up with some other name. I don't know what other name we would come up with, but call them a scrub, basically designate a player as a scrub that if you so choose, you can have it, as long as they have not played yet, you can keep that flag on them as a scrub player, which will be subbed out up until, or if somebody on the bench has the scores that you want. So it's a unique feature and it's a strategy that anybody who's a top player uses. And so what I think is, let's make it accessible. Let's make it something that's built into the game itself, and let's make it accessible to everyone in the game as this is how to use this strategy, and we're making it really easy for you to use so that you don't have to go and find 4.5 million scrub players to throw in your team and hope that they don't end up in the starting 11 somehow because of 4 injuries on the team. So that's my idea, is let's take the switcheroo from being a gimmick and turn it into an actual strategy. That would be a thought.
So, Ryan, if I'm hearing you, I like what you're saying. Since the two most common, the switcheroo and the autoroo, just for kind of something functional that may work, we either put 3 guys on the bench that are competing for 2 spots, and we take the best scores off of that. That's usually a little less budget intensive to do that.
Yep.
Could the mechanic be let me finish that thought. The other one is you put 2 scrubs in with 2 guys on the bench, and if you don't like them, you switch out your scrubs. Makes sense as well. it's a little more budget intensive to have the backups ready to go in. You got to leave enough money for those. What if the scrubs weren't scrubs? What if they were just empty roster spots? You leave 2 holes on your roster that you don't even have to pick a player for. They're just there. And you put a couple of guys, you either put 3 guys on your bench and you say, I'm taking the best 2, or you put 2 guys on your bench, but then you're responsible for manually replacing the 2 guys in your lineup if you don't like them. That's real easy. Then you're dealing with just black jerseys, nobody there. It's an empty spot, and you can do it you can put 2 or 3 guys on your bench. If you put 2 guys on your bench, you're saving a whole lot of budget to go somewhere else. If you put 3 guys on your bench, you're hedging your bets a little bit. You're spreading out your money on your bench, but you don't have any of this manual stuff to do later. Like something like that for just a functional analysis of what you're talking about.
Yeah, so my other thought would be, let's say you have a player that you could designate as a scrub, and basically it'd be grayed out then, as in this player is still on your team and he would cost this amount of money. For me, I oftentimes forget which players that I'd want to put in place of a scrub, so that's why it's like, oh, that'd be helpful if I could actually remember and just designate them as such. But the other thing that I thought of would be putting in an empty spot that would be worth like the 4 million or whatever else like that we would expect a scrub to cost normally. And so it still costs you money to do this strategy then. It still costs you budget to do the strategy, but it doesn't... but it takes away some of the variability.
Yeah, I think you have to have a
yeah.
cost to it. I mean, if you had a blank player that maybe was the average of the top players of that position, or 10 million, like you have to pay for that ability. That could be I think a really easy way to do that.
You're opening up a crazy line of thinking here. What if the bench is completely optional in the next game? What if we get 11 starters, and you can pay that 4 million floor?
Because that's not soccer. Right? The point of the bench is to emulate what you do in soccer.
That's not the point of fantasy games.
But that's not the point of a fantasy game. And
the point of a fantasy game is to get points for the players that play in the real game. If you make the fantasy completely different, you cannot take a bench away. No, you can't.
No, I'm not taking it completely away.
Hard stop.
What if it's optional? What if you want to put your $100 million on the field in your 11, no switcheroos, no scrubs, no nothing. You take 11 guys, you play them. That's the risk you take. If somebody doesn't play, nobody's subbing in.
Well, let's change it up real quick. We'll get Skylar's quick reaction to some of this crazy tangent here, and then see if he's got any other thoughts before we move on.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's all, like, I appreciate that feedback, and I definitely see where Ryan's going with it. I just, wholesale changes, that's such a tough thing. I mean, especially with the resources that MLS has right now, and I think that's something that they would definitely at least hear out and consider. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I see where you're going with it, and I do agree that that's a huge part of the game is the switcheroo and autoroo, and that's really what separates some of the top players, like you said. So finding a way to kind of find some middle ground there would definitely be helpful for some of the casuals. I think for me, a few of the things, and some of it, like you said, Reed, will hit on. But some easy things I think would be like just promoting the game, opening the game up maybe at least a month before the first game of the season. I think that's key in driving interest and obviously for numbers, that kind of thing. And 2, I've heard a lot of people just asking what's going on with the social media stuff. Like the Twitter handle's been dead for whatever, over a year now.
Yeah.
And I think at some point, and they just did away with it and said that we're not going to, we don't want to have that as just part of our social media handles across MLS. And I've actually vouched for bringing it back, and I'm going to keep pushing for that. And I think, because I do think that's a huge part of just interacting with the community, driving the game, promoting the game. I mean, I feel like that's a key part. I mean, you see it with Fantasy Premier League, you see it with pretty much any successful fantasy league, they've got a social media presence. And so I do feel like that's a big part of or it would be a big part of MLS fantasy if we could bring it back. And then the last thing I think that I would want to see maybe a change in 2022, which can't guarantee anything, but I'll push for it, is just up the ante on the prizes, kind of sweeten the pot a little bit. This is coming from somebody that won some of the VIP trips back in the day. Drank a beer with Wando on the bus back to the hotel. I'm sure everybody's heard that story by now. But no, I mean, there used to be autographed All-Star balls, team jerseys, stuff like that. Just stuff that I think fantasy players would be a little bit more intrigued by. Not to say, the cash prizes aren't attractive, but just a little bit something to kind of to sweeten the pot and draw players in a little bit more.
Yeah, and that definitely touches. Go ahead.
Thank you, Skylar.
I was gonna say, would you have any say on like having the actual MLS tweet at least one thing out to be like, hey, we have a fantasy game. This is where you go.
I think what we've seen in at least the past couple of years is they hype it up early on. Obviously trying to drive numbers, get some signups early in the season, then it just tails off and there's nothing. They used to actually tweet out the fantasy rankings. They didn't do it this season. Not sure if I'm tailing off a little bit on my rankings or what. I felt like they were all right, but no, I don't know if I had that kind of pull, but I do want to push just that they bring back the social in general and just try to engage a little bit more with the fantasy players and the fantasy community. I think that would be a big part of the game. So I'm going to push for it, guys. We'll see.
Yeah, otherwise they can just retweet MLSFI each week, and then there we go.
Yeah.
I want to see a contract rider that every public-facing MLS staffer has to maintain a fantasy team.
No.
And it could be
calling out Weeby here or what?
only need 15 minutes on a Friday, or a Wednesday. Just 15 minutes. Set some players that you know are going to play. Set the time aside every week and just set a lineup. It doesn't matter if it's all that good, but you know who's playing. You should know the matchups. 15 minutes, you can set a lineup, and that's better than what we're getting now.
Now you just found some job for an intern for a little bit. That's all it's going to be. Is one guy's or gal's going to sit there and just be like.
Would the intern do better than we be picking a team? Because
yes.
if it would, it's an
Yes.
improvement.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, let's start getting down into this survey. Thank you so much for everyone who's responded so far. We have about 80 respondents. If you're just tuning into the show, please do head over to MLSFantasyBoss.com. You can participate in the survey right there. Results are going to go to MLS, so your feedback will go to the people who make the decisions about this game. And they also come to me for how we make decisions for what we're making with MLS Fantasy Boss and MLS Fantasy Insider. First, some general just takeaways from the survey that we have. I told you about 80 people. Most of our respondents came from people who have played the game before, so not a lot of new people have been taking this, are U.S.-based, consider themselves hardcore players, and I define that in the survey as someone who is, I'm here to win and score as many points as I can every round. That was what I defined as hardcore for somebody. That's right. That most people don't participate in daily fantasy betting who have taken our survey. They have said that they watch more MLS games because of fantasy. They hate the app, is the general feedback there. They think there should be more marketing for the game. So we're not going to touch on some of these things because we get it. The app is not great. The marketing is not great. We get it. And also that as far as some of the changes that happened this year, as far as how team values changed and how player price adjustments were made, those were overwhelmingly, people were satisfied. They either marked as satisfied or very satisfied with how those systems worked. Now, if we keep this type of fixed budget or not fixed budget, we'll talk about that in a second, but the way values changed and price adjustments happened, people were very satisfied with that. So that's some of the just surface level general. These are the type of people who have taken the survey. This is the type of respondents who have given us the data that we're going to be talking about today. So one of the big topics of feedback that we got from people, double game week scoring. That was a new change, and the big question is, should MLS bring back the aggregate double game week scoring? Of course, this year it was you got the highest of the two games. Is this going to have an impact on player selection? Is it going to make D-mids more valuable? These are all things that people were talking about. Tyler, do you want to start us off, and anybody else, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, it definitely should be brought back. That is opinion, but I absolutely love the like aggregate DGW because there's so much variations of how high someone can score versus how low someone can score. And it also it brings back the D mids, like the Ozzy Alonsos, the Diego Charas, the Alex Rings. Like those guys were very, very rarely on anybody's team this season or last season when we were doing it. But like they're basically dead players at that point. But now if we have the aggregate scoring, I personally usually have like at least one of those players, and then I grab more boom players after that. And I think it actually does open up like a wide variety of different players you can grab. It just makes the captain pick really chalky though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also love the combined double gaming feature. I think that one of the things that made me miss it the most this year, I was fine with it last year. Of course, every time I had someone who went off twice, I was like, oh, if only. But one thing about this year that made me really miss it was just how many double game weeks we had, right? Like the way that they structured some of the scheduling, there just felt like there were so many more. And I might be off. Someone can go back and look over the last couple seasons. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it helped with. Am I wrong?
So I can do that.
You can't count. I just feel like it kind of made it more interesting, which might sound counterproductive because if you pick a chalky player that normally plays both games, obviously you want both those points. Like, some of the weeks we did Barcos, some of the Philly players, stuff like that. But I think that it just kind of helps with the rotation, in the sense that you don't have to focus solely. I mean, Discord would go crazy, if Heel was on the bench on a double. Like, what do you do? Do you play him? Do you not? Do you play him? Do you not? And I think that kind of tinkering goes away when it's combined. If that makes sense. And that was just an aspect of double gaming that I don't like. I don't like having to look at the lineup and be like, well, it's not worth one game. And again, maybe that's what I'm talking about is strategy other people like. But this season made me miss the combined double game week. And double game weeks are rare across other fantasy leagues. I mean, it hardly exists. But it is one of the things that I think makes MLS fantasy unique. And so it just makes me kind of miss the even more unique part, which was the combined play.
The biggest downside is single game week players are like dead with the new double game week, or the old double game week scoring.
Yeah.
So I'll own up to that one because I know I was a big proponent of moving to this system because I felt that it would increase the viable pool of players to people to have some of those single game week players for the exact strategic elements you're talking about, Ashley, of what one game do I want? Because we always see it, no matter which system that we have in place, there's always a single game week player who makes it into the dream team. There's always some guys who come in there and do just amazing in their game. But I still feel like even with this system, people drifted towards those two games because you did have two shots, as I know as Skylar liked to often say, 2 bites at the apple. So I mean, that still exists, and so I will admit I don't think it maybe had as big of an impact on which players were in the running week in and week out as maybe I had hoped, because I do really believe that there are single game week games that we should always look at, and I was hoping that this could help make that more visible, and maybe it didn't quite do what I had hoped it would, but I'm fine with either system. But that's one thing I would definitely say. I'll take a step back and be like, I may not have been right about that.
Yeah, Reed, kind of that. I'll start with, I'm biased because the single game week or the single score is my rule. James gave me permission to claim it as my rule, so it's the one I advocated for hard for a long time, and we finally got it in. And I like it because it does make single game week players viable. If you see a guy resting in the first of a double game week, then you've really got to choose. Do I want to try him for a sub in, see if he does well? Heel was that way a couple of times. We were kind of like, we're going to take him for the second game, but if he subs in and has a good score here, I feel like it's better for the player pool to do that. Now, I miss the massive scores. I really do. And I know it's already been posted that teams are going to have, like, I think a max of 5 double game weeks next year. Like,
it's
they're
5,
supposed to be doing that. If MLS can schedule the games in a way where we have maybe 5 or 6 or 8 big double game weeks in the season, where we know we're going to be playing midweek and we're going to be playing weekend, I'm perfectly fine if we've got a more level playing field for that. If every team's on a double game week, 5 weeks of the season, to make sure we can get 34 games in per team, and okay, we got 5 weeks where every single player's got 2 bites at the apple or can get an aggregate score. Let's do it. Like, I have no problem with that because it balances it and everybody gets the chance at it, and you're not really making the decision of, oh, am I doing this? Oh, am I doing that? But otherwise, I like the single because it does bring in a lot of other players. You take a hot Carlos Heel over some double game week midfielders. Absolutely you do. And we saw that a lot. Mukhtar was the same way. You take a hot Mukhtar over some of the double game week players. Defenders are your big one. You're always going to take a double game week defender to get 2 bites at the apple. That's just the way it goes. But in the forward forwards we did that too. 2 shots at getting a goal is better than 1 and not getting it. But in the midfield, we saw a lot more single game
point scoring actions, I think is what we called it.
Yeah. Yeah, the new one, scoring actions, definitely. But I think there's a happy middle here. I do like the single game week scoring, but I think if the scheduling changes, we're good with going back to the old one. It's just too much variance, and I think if one of the things that I always hear with this is double game week aggregate scoring makes D mids viable. I think that opens up another conversation not to have here, but we need to have a conversation about fixing D mids. Like, if D mids are not viable, if we've got 1 player per team, if we've got 20 to 30 players in the MLS pool of players that are not viable, we need to find a way to make them viable.
I got ideas there if you're interested.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think that's in the scope of this podcast. I think that's a behind the scenes with Skylar type of conversation to have. Like,
Okay.
can we play test it a little bit? Can we throw out some ideas and see if we can make some changes? Can we get the provider to do this? I think there's a definite need to target D mids, and one of the biggest defenses of aggregate scoring I tend to hear is it makes D mids viable, and I think that's a different problem to solve outside of this. And I like this because it makes every player viable in a single game or in a double game week setting.
Mm-hmm.
We always joked about it. I think it was Koala that told us it's roughly 1.7 times your average on a double game week.
More than half.
Meaning you're getting about 85% of your average points per game in this split scoring setup. So if Heel is averaging 10, you're looking at 8-9 points per game. So he's going to come down just a little bit. In the aggregate scoring, you take that every time. In the single game, when you got single game week guys, 85% of your normal points in one game is not going to cut it. You're really hoping for a boom in one and just middling in the other. So I like the single game. I like the split scoring, but I think if the schedule facilitates it, we can go back to the old rules easy enough.
Yeah, I think I'd be worried that if the schedule weren't like this in the future, that we've changed the rules to something that may not be. Let's say we go back to having 12 or 15 double game weeks. I wouldn't want to make a change that relies on something that is beyond fantasy to go back to. And I'll just be upfront. I'm really risk averse. I'm a statistician who likes low variance things because they're easier to predict, and combine double game weeks to hit 2 hits that add together equals lots of variance. And so I've always it doesn't fit my play style. I'll just put it that way. So
I'm sorry,
if we
Ryan.
change it back to that, I probably won't win anything. So maybe that's just...
This is my only shot at winning anything, though.
It's probably why I won something this time, is because this risk averse methodology is like, I play the percentages of things, and if the percentages are not as variable all the time, then I tend to win out in the long run. But that's just kind of the way I play. So yeah, but I do think that there are some ways that we can very easily change the D-mid scoring, though, and get that feature back while still keeping this style of scoring. In fact, we could even make them like what they were. They were a safe play, and that's why people chose them. And there's a couple things that we can add that's already in the Opta scoring that pretty much only benefits D-mids, goalkeepers, and defenders, which are honestly the three positions that need more points at this point in the game. So I think there's some stuff that's viable out there that we can have, that, like we said, like, you know, best of both worlds kind of a thing.
Yeah, and of course go ahead, Skylar.
No, I'm just going to chime in and just add my thoughts here. I mean, that's all good stuff, and I think for me, I've always been an advocate. I've always been of the mindset that every action, as he said, should count. Every fantasy point should count, and I just think it's important, especially in a season-long format. And I can't really think of any fantasy game that they don't count fantasy points for certain games. I'm not saying that MLS needs to mimic like NFL fantasy or NBA fantasy, whatever, but I mean, pretty much all of those games, every single game counts, every single point counts. And I feel like that's important. I mean, I think that it's part of the fun of MLS fantasy is, like you guys said, I mean, it's kind of a dynamic that you have to decide, is it worth playing a double game week player? Maybe like if it's only two teams on a double game week, then you've got a guy like Diego Chara who might score 5 points one game, 6 points the next game. Is that going to be worth playing him over a guy like Carlos Gil, who, 10 or 11 points, that's typically what you want out of him. And so I think that does make defensive midfielders, kind of brings them back into the equation a little bit. So I'm an advocate for it. I mean, I feel like it adds excitement to the game. And, say like midweek, Hani Mukhtar scores 20 points. If you're just getting that one game, then you're kind of like, I'm happy with it. But I mean, come the weekend, then you'd love to see another 10 points on top of that. So like Ranch said, I mean, it just adds such a dynamic to just such a big swing in scoring that, if you're looking to make a big jump, then that double game week score could really help do that. And it could really mix things up in the standings. And that's what I like about it.
Yeah, and Skylar's right. That the conversation does change, as we had in the past. If this was one of your first seasons playing, it's not necessarily, D-mids are fantastic. I'm looking at maybe getting a more guaranteed 10 from this player. It's, are you going to do that 10 from Dax McCarty, or am I going to go over here with Mukhtar and maybe he gets a 3 at one game and then a 14 in another one? So I mean, it's not just that consistent. We're talking more about ceilings at that time with a lot of players still. So. But no, that's definitely a hot topic. So some pros and cons, both sides. If you have an opinion on hashtag the Blaine rule, feel free to at him on Twitter, or send it to us right here at MLSFI. So some fun times there. Let's move on to our next one, and we mentioned it some already. Fixed budgets, or return to fixed budgets. Should we return to budgets? So the big advantage here is people talk about players having to make tough choices, and some people thought that the budgets grew too quickly, didn't really pace with player prices, and so easily before the middle of the season you were just able to build a team, whatever, it didn't matter, you just threw players in. Would a fixed budget do that? Ashley, what do you think?
I ride this one right in the middle. Tyler mentioned this a little bit ago. I like a fixed budget because I also consider myself someone who does well kind of finding the, not diamonds in the rough, but like the off player, right? And when you have a fixed budget, it is so much harder to go chalk. It's almost impossible to have an entirely chalk team. because you can't afford them all, right? If we were at a fixed budget this year, I think a lot of people's teams towards the end of the year would have not been able to exist. So I think it does kind of add some diversity to team selection, and things like that. But on that same token, it makes it not more interesting, but not having a fixed budget this year, I think, was a little different because of how players went up in price, where they started. They just they changed it a little bit. So I think it was less egregious. It was, for me, more fun in the beginning to try to find that player who was going to price rise and stuff like that. And that doesn't continue through the whole season, when you don't have a fixed budget. And so, like I said, I think the scaled budget makes it easier to go chalk. And that's just something that I like about having it. But at the same time, I'll complain immediately if we go back to it and I can't afford all the people that I want. And that's kind of, you see it in EPL fantasy, how they drop and rise players and like how much they cost. You couldn't chalk an EPL team to save your life, right? Like you can't put all those players on your team and still afford to play everybody. So I think, when we look at mimicking, and then, most NFL fantasy, it's not even really about price, it's just about positioning. So I don't know. I think there's pros and cons to it either way. I do think that this year, having it not fixed, it was a little better, in how players started and how they rose. But generally, I prefer kind of the intrigue of having to adapt to a fixed budget. And then even then, like I said, you can't even go chalk because there's 7 chalky players and you can only afford 4. So which ones do you grab from? So I don't know. I go back and forth on what I like, but I do think I lean towards more the fixed budget. But I liked it. I liked the not fixed budget this year.
I'm not as opinionated on either one. I do think that, like you said, Ashley, it was easier this year, and I think if I remember correctly from the beginning of the year, a lot of the highest priced players that were maybe ending last season somewhere in the 13, 14 million were around 11 million or something like that this year. I think Heel was only like 12 million, or I don't remember what it was. It was lower. Let's just put it that way. So for everybody's first draft, at least,
Yo finished on 11.3.
Okay, last year, what did he start
Oh,
at?
last year?
What did everybody start at this year?
Season change. He went up 1.8, so
Yeah.
9.5. No.
So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Like we had even some of the best players were all priced lower than probably what they were going to be, and so it was almost guaranteed that everyone was going to get price rises and that it was easier to get those first few drafts in. And then after like week 6, I didn't have to pay attention to it anymore.
Yeah.
So it made it easier, I think, for everyone to be able to get price rises and not have to focus so much on it, even though I still did. But I think it was easier this year. And so I don't really, I probably prefer that fixed budgets again. In other words, like you can find the hidden gems maybe a little bit more, but it's fine with me, I guess.
Yeah.
I do want to officially protest the lack of the written algorithm for what player prices, how they change, because the comparison would be, okay, this is a proprietary algorithm. That's fine as long as it doesn't affect how my team's value changes. Otherwise, we can have. I mean, it was written. It was complicated, but it was written out before where it would rise by 0.1 or 0.2 or whatever it was.
A few years ago, they had the system set up where the change was determined by the average performance of players in that position that played over X minutes, and so you could see it a little bit at that point.
So I prefer either fixed budget and you can keep the proprietary algorithm however you want to, or even maybe we could be like DFS and actually put out price or like prices each week, or go to a system where it's a clearly defined and clearly published algorithm for price changes and keep the keep the variable budgets. That's
Yeah. I'm team fixed budgets for one reason and one reason only, and I know Skylar has paid attention to this some, is I like the idea that any player can start at any given week and
Yep.
have a level playing field against the field. But I also want that to come with MLS prize support for the weekly game.
yes.
I want to see 100 million or a variable budget throughout the season. We can start at 100 million and go up by $500,000 each week
Yeah.
to adjust
Like what-
for
yeah.
player pricing increases. We got 27 weeks. You go up $500,000 each week. You're at 113 million by the end of the season with the 27 weeks we had this year. That's fair for me. Maybe you go up by $1 million each week, and the money goes whatever. I want it fixed, and I want MLS to provide a weekly prize to the overall winner or winners, maybe 3 prizes. It could be people just want to win stuff, and I say this all the time. It's like you could give away a $25 gift card to the MLS store to first place, and then everybody who finishes top 10 for the round could get a 10% off coupon, and a 10% off coupon is at least getting something. We buy merch. We're fans. You can go buy a scarf. You can save $250 on a scarf if you do that. Like,
It's a write-off from the taxes.
yeah, it's something. It doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or otherwise. It's something that you're giving away. And a 10% off coupon is forcing people to spend money in your shop. Coupons are the best way to make money, in my opinion, because you get people to come in and buy stuff they normally wouldn't buy. So it's a marketing scheme on top of that, but people feel like they won something. I buy a scarf every year. I could hold out and wait to see if I get top 10 in a round rank to go get 10% off my scarf that I'm gonna buy that year. It's whatever. But that's why I like fixed budget. Is it gives you a level playing field every week, and it gives an opportunity to tell people it's like, oh, you missed a week. Who cares? Go play for a weekly prize.
Yeah.
Let's promote some weekly prizes as well as the season-long prizes. Let's give people a chance to go win something. A 10% off or a 25% off gift card is still more than not winning anything. And I'm good with that. I don't mind the variable budget. I don't mind it growing. I do kind of hate how it's done in the current game. That we have a budget after a few weeks that we don't even care what player prices are anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're not looking at it. James is in chat with us. Thank you, James, for being here. He said they talked about a sell-on fee. I would honestly be happy with, okay, Vela gets his $500,000 increase every week. So his player price is going to go up $500,000. But you only get half of that in a budget increase. So he goes up by $500,000. You get $250,000 more to spend. So the players are going to accelerate faster than everybody else. It makes you make those choices. We don't get super inflated budgets to where we can afford everybody, but we are getting rewarded for making the right moves and getting guys that are going to get value increases. We just don't get the full value increase. So if everybody goes up, you can't afford everybody on your roster again. You got to go make some changes.
Right.
I think managing our budget compared to where the players are, so we can't just afford whatever we want and not have to worry about budget anymore, is good for the game. And I'm okay with it, but I prefer fixed budget because it's very new player friendly and it makes weekly prizes a lot more viable, and you put everybody on a level playing field for weekly prizes. And I think that's the best way to grow the game, and my focus has been on more growing the game rather than what's the most competitive way to play the game.
Can we get more Nathan Smith? That's what I want.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's easier now with more teams and having a larger player pool. That was one of my concerns early on. Was will you have enough viable players to help fill some of those spots? And it's definitely easier now. I think I'll make good points about the management elements of that, of having to think about how you spend your money. I mean, a good middle ground from what everyone's been saying is maybe tie the increases to the quarters of the Champions League. That you have 100 million at the beginning, and then for quarter 2 you have 110, then 120. Then to sort of give a little bump to everyone as the players are rising. Maybe it's only 100 to 105, but that might be a way to try to give you a little bit extra cash to catch up with some of the player prices, but still make it so you can't have Vela and Tati and Bo and Heel and Mukhtar and all on your team. Any thoughts from you, Skylar?
Yeah, I think everybody kind of hit on the best of both worlds there, and I'm kind of split too. I mean, I think, like Blaine said, I mean, I think fixed budgets kind of help those out who jump in mid-season and still want to play. And I also think that the unwritten pricing algorithm from this season kind of helps out in that aspect too, because people could still jump in and pretty much build a pretty solid team, regardless, just with the way that the pricing was so swingy. But no, I mean, I'm kind of split down the middle on that too, and I like Blaine's creativity there with the weekly prizes, the coupons. I just checked MLSstore.com, Blaine, and they've got looks like they're running free shipping on orders over $29. So if you want some more SKC gear there,
Get a scarf.
jump on it.
Get a scarf. Okay.
You win.
Let's move on to our next question. This one is speaking directly to Ryan because Ryan wrote a little mini fantasy dissertation in response to this question. And so I tried to, there's a lot of great stuff. So whenever you pass this on, Skylar, you all can have fun dissecting all that. A lot of great information there. I tried to distill it down to a very, I mean, I probably didn't do it justice with this, but I sort of combined some of what I was thinking and you were thinking with this. And you were talking about the availability of data and the ability for people to get access to data, player stats and sorting and viewing and all that. That's kind of how I lumped this together with like dashboards and filters and UIs. And so I'm just going to kind of throw this over to you in general, Ryan, for other feedback that we got of people wanting to be able to have better access to data natively in the game. Be that, I mean, I'm a strong believer that every point generating action should be a filter in the game.
Yeah.
That just period. I think that should be it. But that kind of mentality of people wanting more insight into how they pick players seemed to be a lot of what you were saying. So your general response to this.
Yeah, because I'm the type of person that is happy to take the time to do all of that myself and gather the stats and whatever. 99% of other fantasy players are not going to do that though. So I don't want just my openness and my coding abilities, I guess you could say, to be the reason why I end up succeeding in some of this and other people aren't able to. I think, you know, if we can add more of those filters, if we add even some of the things like let's say we're talking about a player on the pod here and we use the name Tati. The name Tati doesn't show up in fantasy anywhere. And with the shortened names that appear, I think it's trying to be like built for mobile. And I want to be able to know what the player's full name is so that I could actually reference him if somebody else has mentioned him. A few things like that, just being able to find players. And then I have done this a couple times where I have put a player on my team, and then later on I decided to go search and sort by, let's say sort by ownership or something like that. And I was like, I don't see Heel anywhere in the ownership. I wonder where he's at the level. And then I realized, he's on my team. That's why I can't find him. Or I think like I'm typing in the name wrong or something like that. But I realized, he's already on my team. That's why I can't find him in any of the sort filter things. So if my suggestions, I say, would range anywhere from tweaks like that. Just like, okay, change the color of the player that's already in your team instead of removing them from the list entirely. To some of those wholesale, like, let's add all of the filters in the world kind of suggestions. That's I try to think if there's any other even like the ability, like captain selecting procedure, that again might be considered a major change from I've done a bit of software dev, so I understand changing a functionality thing is going to be different than change the color of a item, you know. And so I have oftentimes selected the wrong captain because if it's only the person's first name and last name in a small font in a drop down, it's really hard to tell which person is which. I think I selected Araujo instead of Arango one time, and I just caught it before before the lineups or before I kind of finalized my team. But yeah, just making it really easy for people to pick their captain. You know, maybe they select the person, and then there's a button that says "select as captain" or something like that next to the remove team. Just a few, things that I think would make it easier, prevent mistakes from people. Um, Maybe give more stats on the actual players themselves who are on the pitch. Um, I know I don't know of many other fantasy games that actually show the players on a like on a positional pitch kind of a thing. Most other fantasy games that I'm aware of have a player's name and then a list of stats next to it, and uh, maybe it doesn't look as good, but I think it becomes more helpful for the fantasy players that way. Um, and I think lastly, the ability to share your team. Everybody in Discord pretty much uses a screen clipping tool and tries to clip their team somehow and paste it into a chat somewhere. Um, but I think if there was one feature that would be just really helpful for the community side of things, that's that extra ability. Can I press a button and it copies a picture of what I have and doesn't do the sharing feature that we have currently kind of cuts off some players. It doesn't list your budget. It doesn't, anything like that. And that's one that everybody that I know of pretty much that wants to share their team, that's what they do. And I think that would really help people share their team overall, and just remove one of those things that is an annoyance, I think, for a lot of players. Can kind of take that step out and make it more of a smooth process, I guess, to share a team. And I think that's what we need to do is we all want to be able to, share those types of things with other people and hopefully spread the game more with that. And I think, I don't know how much of an effect that would be, but it certainly it would be one of those things that would feel like less annoying about the game overall.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan on this. The stats are pretty much there. You can go into any player profile, which takes a couple of clicks to get to, which is there. And you can see their weekly stats. You can see the breakdown by whatever they've got, passes, key passes, yellow cards, whatever, big chances created. All of that's there. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, which nobody ever does, you can see a total on that.
Yeah.
I don't mind the stats window the way it is. I love the stats screen where you click on it. It gives you all positions. It's sorted by like average. You can sort by percentage owned, which is not viable. You can sort by total points. I would love the option for generic stats and a detailed stats, and detailed to give you, even if it's season totals, I would love to see season totals that's on everybody's page displayed in one line so you can sort it by any one of those columns.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you want to see who's got the most passes. Okay, go do it. You want to see who's got the most interceptions because you're picking a defender. Go do it. Look at who's got the most interceptions. Look at who's got the most clearances. Just being able to sort by those, because they're already in the database. It's only a UI issue on getting that to us to where we can sort by it. And I'm playing NFL this year for the first time in about 5 years. Being able to go through and look at those in the NFL world is insanely helpful for me, trying to get back into the game, get up to speed. I don't know what's going on. I'm not a good NFL player. I'm playing with the church league that I'm in there because I like the guys I'm playing with. But it's been helpful for me to go in and find that type of thing. Yeah. Reed's always talking about the best bonus point producers on defense. These guys are getting the most bonus points every week. I want to just be able to go through and search. It may not tell me who's got the highest average, but I can go see who's got the most interceptions on the season or clearances. or whatever, and then I can kind of make my decisions based on seeing those stats. And you can sort by defenders too. So it would be helpful. The information's there. I just want to be able to get to that, and I want to be able to compare every player with every other player rather than, oh, and I did it for tonight when we're going to talk about the MVP. I pulled up 3 different guys' season-long status, and I started looking at all the different numbers because I love dealing with stats when I talk about something like that. But I want to be able to compare them a lot easier instead of having to have 4 windows open or 4 tabs open and look at each individual stat and then scroll through the entire screen of that. I just want to see the totals on one page. And I don't think that's too much to ask because this is already in a database. We've already got all of this there. It's just getting it displayed to the screen so everybody can see it in a quick manner.
And I think that part of the consideration probably for how the app was designed is mobile, and it does feel right now like a mobile first application. In that when you open up a player, it opens up in a new screen, because that's how mobile does it. Is it would open up a player in a new screen kind of a thing. The relatively few amount of stats available also feels like something that it works on mobile because that's as many as you can fit on a screen, but it's not built for desktop as much. And so I think a lot of these choices were made intentionally, but in a way that it's supposed to be kind of like a good mobile game. And there's a lot of us that play on desktop, I think, that would really like the additional capabilities, like what we see, like Yahoo Fantasy Football mobile. Yeah, it's not as full featured, but you can still play the game decently well. But if you really want to go see more stats and stuff like that, then go to the desktop site and go check it out. The question is manageability of that then for people on the back end, because that probably takes more.
So I guess the question then becomes ultimately for Skylar, is the availability of stats a factor within MLS's ability to change, or is that a FanDuel limitation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a conversation to be had with the game provider, FanHub, and I think for me, then I agree with you guys. Like, it's a stat-driven game, so I mean, even doing my rankings, I'm looking at MLS cheat sheet. I'm looking at Ryan's, XGs, clean sheet odds, everything. Just trying to kind of get a feel for, what edge can be had that week, what player's in the best spot, and I mean, yeah, I mean that's basically the gist of the game, is trying to figure out who's in the best spot. So I mean, it's stat driven, and you want to be able to look at the stats and make that decision quick and easy. And yeah, I mean, I agree. Right now, there's definitely some room for improvement on that, and I think it is something that, like Blaine mentioned, I mean, it's there. It's just a matter of including it for everybody to see. And so, for me, I mean, I'd love to see something like be able to pull up on a drop-down box, like who's scored the most bonus points over the last 3 game weeks, that kind of thing, and make some decisions based off of that. So, like I said, I mean, I'm going to have that conversation with the team probably end of the season and talk a little bit more in depth on some of the feedback that everybody's provided, some of the feedback that even the community's provided over the last week or so from your surveys, Reed. And I think hopefully some things can be improved upon based off of that. And so I'm definitely going to vouch for it, and just a matter of if it's a possibility to make it happen and push it through.
Bring back CBIs. That'll help defenders right there. Combine them all together. All right, so the final question from the survey before we get into just some quick rapid-fire fun questions to wrap everything up. The big one, the yearly one, have to bring it up, I guess, and that is it time for draft? Is it time for MLS to switch to or provide an alternative for draft fantasy? Blaine, I guess you have to start us off with this one.
Yeah, as the resident draft expert-ish, yeah, I'm always going to promote draft. I love playing draft. I've got a couple of guys on the stream with me that have played in our draft league. Mixed results there, but it's always fun. It's always a thing. Draft is what Americans know from other sports.
Yep.
Draft is just it's a fun way to play. it's a more personal way to play. And I think MLS is way too late in trying to get to this. I think they need to offer it on their website. It doesn't even have to be prize supported. I think they need to offer it because the stats are there, the player scores are there. It's not too much, but if you can say, hey, form a 10 or 12 person league and play a draft game on our website, drive people through the website and let them go. Honestly, I think you could facilitate draft into the regular fantasy game. Hey, I don't want to set my fantasy lineup, but I'm playing draft. Let's use my draft lineup for fantasy. You're almost always going to come in under budget. Just add my lineup.
That's good.
It's just the way the game works. I don't see why we wouldn't want to. It's advertising to more people. It's trying to draw in more players. They're more personal. You can join random leagues, but I've never joined a random draft league that I've stuck with for more than half a season. You're always playing with friends, but you give people the option to go set up a league with 10 or 12 teams with their friends, bring them in, play against each other. It can only be owned by one team. It's a lot of fun. It can be as casual or as hardcore as you want it to be, depending on the group you're playing with. And I just think it's a good thing to have because it will bring people in. And I think if you've got people coming to your site just to do that, they're going to enter a lineup into the regular game to try to win some prizes too. Because you're right there. It doesn't take too much longer to go, oh, maybe I just want to put my team in and see how they do. Maybe I want to try to compete over here. But you're there. It's not too much more time and effort to do it. So I think it's a good cross-promotional thing. It's a good way to bring in NFL guys who are trying to break into soccer.
Yep.
They know draft, they understand draft, they've got an NFL league, and that whole league can go, what are we going to do from January till September?
Mm-hmm.
Let's try this MLS thing. Let's just see where you're closing out with the Super Bowl at the first week of February. All right, we're right in time to pick an MLS team. Let's just all go through it, and if we get burned out, we're going to burn out around the time that NFL starts up again. But at least they've given it a try. It's just a good way to bring people in, and I think as a marketing strategy as well as just another offering, it'd just be helpful for the league in general to have.
Yep.
And I'm not asking for a ton of stuff. I've volunteered, and Skylar, I'll say it in front of you again, I've volunteered to give the draft rules we use over to MLS to help kind of build a framework for an automated system that can be done. The information's there. It's just giving us a platform to play on that uses the same scoring metrics that are already in the main game.
Mm-hmm.
You're not having to recreate the wheel. You're having to add in a waiver system, which isn't terribly hard and can be done pretty automated, and go from there. I think it can be done with minimal cost, but I think you can try to open up and grab some other markets that aren't following this, that you can get some friend groups in that are going to say, we're going to play and we're going to try it out. And what you really want draft to do is to provide investment in the games. You get a bunch of NFL guys in the offseason that are bored and want to try something new. They're going to start tuning into games that have their players in them. Mm-hmm. They're going to start watching, and the more eyes you can get on the game, the more fans you're going to convert. Because everybody in America, or the vast majority of Americans that like other sports, say, oh, well, that's just such a boring game. Mm-hmm. You tie it in with fantasy, you get the excitement of seeing guys score goals, and all of a sudden they get hooked on what soccer is all about. And it just takes time to get them there. I've never taken a friend to a game that's not a soccer fan and had them walk out going, I don't think I can watch this again. They get hooked when they see it. You just got to get that hook in them to get them in there, and draft is the facilitator for that, to try to steal some other markets, because that's the system they know. They don't know our salary system. They don't know that's what we're doing. But you give them draft, we can get them hooked into salary system after that.
So our two Seattleites, Seattlevillians had some reactions to this question right off the top. So I think you all need to respond. Ashley, did you have a strong reaction to draft?
The only thing I visibly reacted to was when Blaine said and maybe replace, because I think you can never replace it. What the current fantasy is with a draft. I think you would lose so many people, but I think having the ability to incorporate a draft, if it's possible for MLS, would be huge. I think something that's very important while we all love and play this game to understand is that MLS is only going to do what MLS is able to do, and we're watching them. And Skylar, please know that I'm not saying MLS and like looking at you. I just mean like in general. And please know that that's not what I'm doing. But MLS is cutting positions. They're cutting funding to ask for the world and expect anything. I think it's fair to say what we would like to see change, but I think it's important to be realistic about it. And while I don't necessarily, I don't have the capability to give anything to MLS to make it easier for them to do draft. I would love to play it. I do it in EPL. I do a regular team, and then I do a draft league with my friends. I love the concept of draft, and I think that Blaine hit the nail on the head with the fact that it's more personable. But I don't think for MLS's money they're going to give a shit about personability, and I don't necessarily think that they need to. And so I think to have it incorporated in some way would be great, but it's got to be on the middle or low end of the like priority total poll when it comes to MLS fantasy, in my opinion. And I say that as someone who, while I don't play for MLS, I do play it in other leagues and I enjoy it. I just don't think it's a feasible ask.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I was over here. I'm like, hey, maybe we can convert, since we already have the head-to-head thing, which is basically what draft is head-to-heads, and then you find the winner and score it and all that. We have the head-to-head. We have the scoring aspect. We can convert head-to-head to draft league. Not sure how much work that would be like overall, but
A lot. That's why I feel like
but it's a thought to throw out there. Like it could be something that's converted since you have the head-to-head aspect in there.
I bet the top 200 players would play it. Like if this podcast who mostly speaks to players who play, I bet most of the people in Discord would do it for sure. But I don't know that that's a priority reflective of what we've seen MLS do in regards to MLS fantasy. It would shock me if that was a priority.
Yeah, those of you who are listening should jump onto YouTube now to see just the chat for this section, because people are throwing these things out, and James is in the chat here being like, what's the ROI? Is it the league's responsibility? Like he's throwing out all these business things. Meanwhile, I'm like, what do you call someone who's from Seattle? Seattleians? Seattleians? So this is the point of the show. You need to go to the chat and see it.
It is Washingtonian, so you were getting there.
I think it's the broad one. I'm looking more.
Soundurians.
Soundurians. There he is. We found it. If you're from Seattle, you're a Soundurian. That's what it is.
I do think, just really quickly here, that from an ROI perspective, I get where James is coming from with this. Like, we need to be able to prove that whatever changes happen, which are going to cost anybody anytime in MLS, are going to actually help with something on the bottom line. And I think eyeballs is probably what MLS really wants to go for in getting viewership, because TV contracts are the biggest money makers for basically any sports league. So in my opinion, at least, a lot of the catering that I feel that MLS is doing with their team names and things like that to European audiences, it doesn't make any sense to me if we're trying to grow the game here and try to become the not just the second most popular league in the U.S. after Liga MX or whatever it is that we are. And I think that getting Americans and Canadians who are used to a draft league into MLS fantasy, into MLS viewership, getting them to watching MLS games requires coming closer to them in what the fantasy game is doing. That is one of the main ways that NFL viewership took off, is because of fantasy involvement. I started watching games that I would have never watched before that until I got into NFL fantasy. And so
Knew we would
I
watch
do think that draft is going to be a major factor for the culture that we live in. I don't know the numbers between DFS and draft, but this is way closer to DFS than it is to draft at the moment. And I think to get in with the current culture of fantasy in US at least, I believe that a draft will be a major step in bringing more eyeballs to the MLS game.
Do you want to
what I
weigh in
think.
on this one, Skylar, or are you ready for the fun stuff?
I'll weigh in real quick. I mean, I love all those ideas. I think for me, I'm kind of on the same in the same boat as Ashley. I love the draft format. I play, like I mentioned, NBA fantasy, NFL fantasy. I've been competitive in NBA fantasy for the past 2 years. I think I've won my $100 buy-in league, and I can't tell you how many NBA games I've watched over the last couple of years. I haven't watched one this season. I'll tell you that much. And so I just kind of question, outside of the hardcore MLS fans, what the engagement would be like after that first week or two, especially with a lack of prizes, unless people, took it upon themselves in their private leagues to say, hey, it's a $25 buy-in, $100 buy-in, like I do with my buddies in NFL and NBA. Like I don't see it with MLS, but I do love the idea. I love the draft format, and I would play it if it was a thing. But I'm just not seeing it right now. Kind of like what James said. I'm not in the chat, but the ROI is probably the bottom line for MLS right now, and it's not there. So.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the fun thing would be to have actually embedded promotion relegation leagues that people could manage. Maybe that's the cool thing for us.
Are you going there in season long, Reed?
I am. No, for next year, I guess that's sort of the one of the things I'm working on is MLS Fantasy Boston, MLS Fantasy Insider may be, or I'm looking at some logistics of rolling out sort of a pro rel league, three head-to-heads or three systems that would look at how you finish within the league to move up and down through that. So maybe incorporate. I don't know if I'm going to incorporate the Experts League in that, or if that's going to be the Premier League with it, or not. But I'm looking to that. I think that could be a fun way to keep some consistency and longevity and turnover and some fun stuff. Maybe like some of the show league people used to have. But yeah, I think that could be kind of fun. I have different opinions on
I love it.
IRL, but for fantasy, I think it could be fun.
Skylar, really quick before we hit the fun stuff, what I'm hearing is you want to join our draft league that we run through.
That's a side conversation.
No, I was actually in that league.
Were you?
Yeah, no, I was in it a couple of years ago. Just I don't know, the manual input was a little much for me, just with everything else going on.
There you go.
If it was streamlined, and if there was a actual gaming product that would streamline it, then absolutely.
That's
Please.
why
It was
I'm
fun,
offering
though.
you guys our rule set. Like, honestly, I would love to have it automated where we can do this all through.
You're just lazy. That's what it is. Just lazy. All right, well, let's get on to the fun stuff. These are some superlatives, our own little version of the end-of-year awards that MLS has, but also some fun little stats from Ryan. He's talked about how he loves the stats, and you've got a few little gems for us that you'd like to share, don't you?
Yeah, so I went through every single dream team, and I didn't have enough time to find out every single player on the dream team and like count up how many. That was too much for me. But what I did was I looked at captains for the dream teams, and I was interested to see whether there was a huge amount of variation in the positions and let's say who had the most times that they were dream team captains. So there were 3 players who were dream team captain twice. Can you guys guess what those 3 players are? You have any guesses?
Oh, Lord.
Eel?
Aranga's one of them.
No and no.
Chicharito?
Mokhtar?
Nobody's hit it yet.
Oh.
Taddy?
No.
Jack Price.
Is it going to be 3 defenders? Because we've had a few defenders that have dropped some 20s on us.
Yeah.
Wagner?
Alex
So nope, nobody's hit him yet. So we've got Gonzalo Higuain.
No way.
He had twice. Yep.
No,
he hit it
no.
twice.
No.
He hit it twice. Lucas Zelarayan.
Oh, Ola Kamara? No.
No. The third one nobody's gonna get is Christian Dahome.
Oh yeah,
Oh.
I never got that.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Like I was just
That
like, wait,
makes sense.
he was the captain of the dream team twice, but I was like, yeah, that's right, because
Yeah.
I felt like somebody had him one of those weeks. And I'm just like,
Sure.
why did you? I guess he's good. Vancouver had the most. There are 3 teams that had the most dream team captains. So Vancouver had 3, Dahomey times 2, and then Brian White was a captain one time. Nashville had Sapong, Mukhtar, and Zimmerman.
Mm-hmm.
And then Columbus had 2 times Zelarayan, and then Mensa actually was the captain one time.
Always Captain Mensa, remember?
ACM.
So, what do you guys mentioned? Defenders and forwards had the least number. I guess goalkeepers had the least number of dream team captains with 0, which is one of the things that I wanted to address with like we need to increase goalkeeper scoring. But defenders and midfielders each had 10 captains on the dream team, and then forwards had 7. So I was like, wait, defenders were that high? But when you think about it, you get a defender that has a goal and a clean sheet, and they're automatically, way up there.
Yeah.
And then what was that?
Oh, I was gonna say, like, you're talking defenders. I remember one week where Tolkien just absolutely blew up, and I don't know if he's one of them or not. And then Mamadou Fall from LAFC also blew up at one point. Like that clean sheet plus a goal, and there's some guys that have done that have been crazy.
Yeah.
You know who it was? That he earned a PK and scored it, and he was on Miami.
Oh,
McCoon.
he actually I don't think
Did he not get it that week?
I don't remember seeing him in my list.
No, I had him on that week too. I was so
have
hyped.
the spreadsheet up.
I was so hyped. Got that. I think he finished on
McCoon
16
anywhere.
or 17.
Okay, no, I think that was.
But that was probably the week when like Kellen Rowe got like
an
an 18 and just was like, where did he come
Yeah,
from?
it's like Tolkien or Ferreira or something like that.
I'm gonna go find it. I'll be right back.
The highest.
I found
points,
it.
You
Week
found
21.
21. Alan Franco
Alan
just
Franco
went beast mode there.
Yep.
Speaking
McCoon
of which,
was the third highest.
okay. Okay, so speaking of which, Alan Franco is one of the 3 highest weekly point scores of any player out there with 42 points as a captain. I guess that would have been 21 points. What were the other 2, do you think?
Say that again?
There, Alan Franco had the highest points weekly for a player with 21. And so I'm wondering, there are 2 other players that are tied with him. Can
Counting
you guess what they
captain
are?
or not counting?
Well, it has to be captains.
That's before the captains.
This is only
yeah.
captains.
He was
I only
21
look at
before
captains.
captain. Yeah, so he got 42.
Kyle
This
Wagner.
can only be captains.
Did Fall hit a 21 at one point? I know
Yep.
he was close.
Week 19, he hit it.
It wasn't Tolkien, I know that much.
No, it was a forward. I think it was Higuain, didn't it?
Yep. It was Higuain.
Big
Week
Sig.
25. Yep.
Did Arango hit one?
He did not. He
Got a
hit a couple
20, right?
20 something. Yeah, I think he hit a nine. He was the captain in 24 with 19 points. And then there were a few weeks that had the lowest points for a dream
Week 10?
team score. No, actually, week 10, Aliseda from Chicago got 17 points.
Yeah.
It's just like
10
nobody
was
had
just
him, but
nobody had anybody in week 10.
And then we had only 14 points for a captain, 28 total. Higuain in week 1, Arriaga in week 5, Duncan in week 8, and then CJ Sapong in week 16.
Wow.
So those were just some. I was just like, I've never looked at dream teams and like actually figured out like who had the most, but I think it's one of those interesting things that you see a lot of defenders pop up on this list as you may not be able to guess which one is going to do it, but you're going to have a defender that pops off at some point in the week. It's just like they're going to score 1 goal the entire season, and it's going to be when they get a clean sheet as well, and it's just it's going to be crazy.
I think I captained a defender twice this year. Each time they got a clean sheet, so I wasn't upset.
That's Bold move, my friend.
All right, so now we're going to do some of our little superlatives for our Defender of the Year, Goalkeeper of the Year, and MVP. Oh, did you have another one?
Oh, I had the other one, which was the top 5.
Oh, sorry, I thought they got
expected points. No, that's right.
No, go
so
ahead.
This is just expected points across the entire season. And my defenders and mids, I assumed to have a 25% chance of a clean sheet as my across the board, because I didn't want to say, oh, they were on this team, and then go figure out what their actual chance of clean sheet. That was too much. I will only do so much for this podcast. But no, I had obviously number one. Let's just start with midfielders. Number one's going to be Carlos Gil. There you go. 8.3 points, expected points. And this is looking at expected goals and assists and bonus point combination, also with key passes, and there was another one as well. So it technically doesn't include yellow cards, because who's looking at those unless you're looking at yellow card warnings. We got Reynoso then at 7.3, and then Maxi Morales at 7.1. And this is per game. This is not per. This is not overall. And then Ryan Gauld came in 4th. He got up to 7 expected points per by minutes, at least, per game. And then, unexpectedly, I think he made a big run near the end, is Sebastian Blanco. He got 6.9 expected points.
He did come in at the end,
yeah. And then forwards, we had, I'm going to go from the bottom, Kyoto, Arango, Gustavo Bo, Carlos Vela for the minutes that he played, at least. And then...
That's an asterisk.
Really unexpected. He played even fewer minutes than Carlos Vela, but the minutes that he did play, he got just Muko points. Who do you think?
Wando? Because he went.
I was going to say plays for a terrible team, and Wando did play for a terrible team. No, it's not Wando. It was a forward that played kind of a playmaker role.
Ferreira?
No, but that's a good guess. Darwin Quintero.
Okay.
He scored 7. Wow. He was the equivalent of a Ryan Gauld or a Maxi Morales in expected points. Yeah, that was the surprising one for me.
That's crazy, because I was kind of going through your stats list for average fantasy points, and he said Heel had 8.3 expected points, and his average in MLS was 8.25.
Yeah,
and he was the closest to hitting it. Everybody else starts dropping off. But it's crazy. What do you have Arango as for his expected points?
6.4.
See, because he scored 8.47 as his average. Massively.
He scored way above what he was supposed to. Yeah. That was beyond that. But
that's crazy. I love that stat.
Defender of the year, though, Nathan.
What?
No, not yet. We're not there. We're going to all yell it out. We're doing the thing for Defender of the Year, Goalkeeper of the Year, and MVP. We're all going to just say it at the same time. That's what Tyler wanted to do. He thought it'd be fun. But before we get there, so let's do Newcomer of the Year first. Right. We don't have to shout this one out. I'll just go down the lineup. Tyler.
I'm going to go with the fun name, Gauld. Gauld. Yeah, Gauld.
Blaine.
Yeah, I went Arango. You can't get a guy that scores that many goals in that short of a span and not give it to him.
Ashley.
Yeah, Chicho. I mean, when you lose Rossi and Vela and you still get a guy like that, it's just too fun to not.
Ryan.
I did not get him in draft, and I was really bummed, but Chicho Arango, I was like, you got to pick a forward for LAFC because he's going to score goals. And he did. And he just, Gaul would be a second for me, though.
Yeah.
Skylar.
Yeah, it's got to be Arango. I mean, his body of work speaks for itself. He's kind of like a Vela replacement down the stretch for fantasy players. And I will say that I think Slonina from Chicago deserves a shout because he was awesome when he came in. He's talking about a 17-year-old goalkeeper that actually, kept Chicago in some games there down the stretch. So I think he's going to be a fun one for next year.
All right, let's go. And I agree, Arango right there. Let's go on to Under the Radar Player of the Year. We'll start with Blaine.
Yeah, I threw this one out there. It's kind of like that 8 million and below player, that guy that was cheap that we didn't expect to do well that just came on, and mine's Brian White. Nobody expected him at the start of the season to do what he did, playing behind Cavallini, and he just showed up in such a big way and just carried it through late in the season, and became kind of one of those almost mainstays that we were always talking about or always considering for our team. And to go from being a guy that you think is going to be a depth option that's never going to play to a regular hitter is huge for me.
Skylar.
I think it was might have been Tyler that mentioned him, but Gald for me. I mean, his ownership percentage was super low throughout the season, even though he was consistently hitting 7-8 points, just serviceable scores. He wasn't really ever coming through with anything that was a game changer, but he's just super consistent. I was always kind of keeping an eye out for him just to try to plug him in. So it was Gald for me.
Ryan.
I'm going to say a player that didn't play that much, and he got injured and did a lot of international duty. Romel Kyoto. Whenever I had him on my team, he did pretty darn well. Again, limited minutes, but whenever he was on the team, he just did really well. A forward taking things like free kicks and corners, it just ended up working out really well.
Ashley.
Yeah, mine is a little out there, but for me, it's Albert Rusnak. He was 4 points off being the highest pointed player in fantasy, and I feel like we didn't even, maybe this is a knock on us, I feel like we didn't even say his name until halfway through the season. And he was a little mixture of like tons of points, no points, but when you had him and he hit, I mean, he hit hard. I hear the Gald one for sure. I think that he probably was the most underrated because he was so consistent, but Rusnak just quietly had a banger fantasy year, and I think that that's just really impressive, especially for how RSL was kind of spreading points around and going from doing well to doing bad, and so, yeah, that was just really impressive to me.
Tyler.
I'm gonna go with Jesus Ferreira. He's that player that no one really picked up. He was very, very rarely ever drafted from what I saw. But I had him on my draft team, so of course I'm seeing his score every week. This dude was putting up like consistent sevens every single week as a forward, and it was like really impressive to see. He actually finished in like the top 20 or 30 scores in all players.
Nice.
And he didn't even play the first, I think, 5 or 6 games.
He was 6th in my expected points rankings for forwards. Yeah, he was up there.
I fall in between that Gald and Rusnak for the same reasons. Like Gald, I think was the one that just no one really even had on their radar and kind of came up. But I think I did ultimately settle on Rusnak for a lot of what Ashley was saying of that. He had that slow start, had that battle with Krylak back and forth at the beginning, and then he ends up being 3rd overall. And you're like, wait a minute, I know this guy's good, but it seemed like that we were always saying, well, does he make that top 5? Does he do that? And he should have. So maybe it doesn't knock on us.
4 points off Hani Mukhtar, and there was a point where we said that Mukhtar was undroppable. Like, there was a whole stretch of the year where we were like, doesn't matter, fixture proof. And again, I think if we went back and counted the times we said Rusnak, it was probably like 18 times.
Yeah.
And it was 4 points off him. Crazy.
Yeah. All right, so now we're doing the 1, 2, 3, and then say it at the same time because Tyler thought it'd be fun. So we'll see if it is. He wanted the chaos at the end of the show, so I hope everyone appreciates this. So our pick for this, I'll go 1, 2, 3, and then we say it. So our pick for fantasy defender of the year: 1, 2, 3.
Name.
Wagner.
Oh, I knew that'd be great. I know, we love that. So we got some Wagners. We got, I said Gutman. What else do we have?
I got a Fontas here.
Fontas. Well, of course you would.
No. I can actually defend that.
No, we don't need to defend it. We all can just.
All right, next.
No, that's right. I think we had some all good fun ones there.
That's the guy with all the Sporting KC gear in the background.
Okay, you guys can't.
Oh, no, we know what league Skylar's going for next year.
I ran through some of the numbers. Fontas had a single score of 2 and a single score of 3 as his 2 lowest scores on the year.
Mm-hmm.
When you got a defender giving you 4+ every other game besides 2 that he played, he missed a couple of games in there with injuries or yellow cards or whatever. But when you've got a single 2 and a single 3, that justifies it right there. You're getting 2 extra points per game just to roll with him every week.
All right, let's go with goalkeeper of the year. 3, 2, 1. Willis.
Creepo.
Joe Willis.
Turner.
Yeah,
I couldn't remember his name.
I couldn't remember his name. It's okay. Yeah, no, this one was really tough for me. I mean, a lot of the goalkeepers just so close and what they perform, and he had international call-ups and stuff. But I mean, Willis was just so consistent. Turner's another great call that I ended up slotting in a lot, but he missed a chunk of the season as well with some of those call-ups. So yeah.
I think Cornell was a really
It's
underrated.
a good shout. Yeah.
Because their defense wasn't as good, but he still hit pretty well through points. I feel like he wasn't a huge clean sheet producer, and that was we pick him up occasionally, but he wasn't anyone's like consistent pick. If that makes sense. And but he still put in it.
He tended to be like that keeper route. You're like, I'm gonna go with, hey, it worked out, fantastic. Let's go on.
If we take out clean sheets, though, I think what I said was I think Crepo was the best goalkeeper if we take out all clean sheets from everybody.
I think if you take out clean sheets, it's Crepo. Yarborough had almost an identical season to Willis.
Yeah.
If you take out
average, 1 less game played, it was insane. And then I got to throw out there, my shout was Blake, which probably got lost, but he had the best average of any goalkeeper.
I mean, if you take out clean sheets,
he was hands down the best. But he missed so many games for internationals that his numbers just stayed lower.
If you take out clean sheets, you're really only looking at recoveries because that's all that really comes down to what significantly changes a keeper's stats at the end of the game. It's points at the end of the day.
A bad team where he gets a lot more saves, like Vancouver early in the season.
No, if you look at least in the past, maybe Ryan can break it down again for next year, but if you look at it in the past, it's always been recoveries as really the only stat that you could look at it like that's what's going to help me. I mean, everything else just gets in the wash because they're all playing. They're pretty much all the starters are playing the same minutes. The clean sheets are too inconsistent, but like statistically significant differences. It tends to be recoveries. In the past, it was.
If Stuver didn't come back to the mean, he would have been my goalkeeper
For the regression.
here.
Yeah.
Goalkeepers, it is home, whether or not they're playing at home. That's
right.
the first thing.
Yeah.
Opponents' expected goals against, which is weird. Like how bad is their defense, and that says how good your goalkeeper is going to be.
Pressure.
Recoveries is the third.
Recovery.
one.
There we go. Yeah.
So, yeah, and everything else is.
Yeah. XG's a newer
terrible.
one, and then the home. Yeah. So it's all that. And the final one, the final question, the final fun one. 3, 2, 1. This is the fantasy MVP. So 3, 2, 1.
Mukhtar.
Someone said heel.
Mukhtar and heel.
Someone said heel.
Heel first half of the season, Mukhtar the rest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just like to be different. I said Bo.
No.
No.
If you've got to take somebody, I think when you get
Most
all things,
valuable fantasy player.
I think all things
valuable
considered,
fantasy
all things considered, we had enough top end mids between Mukhtar, Reynoso, Rusnak.
If I'm picking a forward, it's Toddy over Bo for an MVP.
I will say Toddy over Bo.
I did the numbers, and Bo's final score came in, but he had very few 2s and 3s. He was getting those scores.
It's not about for me. It's not about your final score. I'm talking about my fantasy MVP. And if I'm looking at a forward, I'd rather look at a forward that's going to be much more consistent in giving me bonus point producing stats than Bo.
And that's what I say. But you got to okay. But I agree with you. The bonus points are big, but Tati tripled or quadrupled the number of 2s that Bo had. Bo's 2s and 3s were few and far between. He got you a few, but he was getting 4s most weeks. If you can tell me you can take a premium forward that's going to get you 4 every week, or most weeks, compared to a guy who may get you 2 or may get you 7.
So, but you're just talking about Bo versus Tati. I'm talking about Honey Mukhtar or heel to Bo. You can't. It's not even the same conversation.
Because you're talking about Bo's going to be a consistent 4, except that I'm going to want to have heel instead.
You have to take at least one forward every week. And I think that
MVP,
average was so
MVP
much better.
is any position. MVP, most valuable fantasy player.
I've got a value over replacement.
How many weeks was Bo in your lineup, Blaine?
Yeah.
A bunch until Heel got hurt. I had
So
Bo
then if
almost
you
Heal
gotta
got
throw
hurt
Bo
and
in.
you
He'll
drop
get
Bo,
hurt.
then Heal's your MVP.
So again, if you don't like the Blaine rule, at Blaine. If you don't think Bo should be MVP, at Blaine. Basically, if you're frustrated about anything from the show tonight, at Blaine, it will be funny. It will be funny.
Hey, controversy sells. I'll give you the hot takes and do it.
So the only reason I said Mukhtar was the MVP over Heal was because I very rarely had Heal on my team, and I still finished in the top 50. Like I just didn't like having Heal and didn't like captaining him.
No.
Yeah, there we go. Whatever works for you. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to us tonight. 2021 was a fantastic season. It sounds like we're going to have some good stuff to look forward to for 2022. We'll do some quick plugs right here. But again, if you haven't already, please go check out MLSFantasyBoss.com to do the survey. It's the top article right now to give some more feedback that will go to MLS. And then we had a question in chat as far as what to look forward to with MLS Fantasy Insider. We will have our usual East and West preview before the season starts, and depending on how much lead time there is for the game next year, we might be able to do a version of the primer and our articles that come out as well at Fantasy Boss. So, and also check out the Discord. That's going to be a hop in place as usual. So mine was first this week, but let's just go around the chart here. So Tyler, any plugs?
No, I'm good.
Ashley.
Yeah, I got Seattleites, Seattletonians.
There we go. Dempseynians. Ryan.
Yeah, Twitter at MLS Fantasy Stats. And then hit me up and let me know what you'd like for next season from me. Of course, depending on what ends up coming out in the game next season. Maybe there'll be more stats there, you know. But yeah, just let me know what you want, and I'll see what I can do to build it, and depending on my time. Although the season is starting earlier next year, so that'll be a cramp on my time. But hit me up with what you want.
Oh, sorry, Blaine.
Yeah, got to give a big shout out to Aaron Rachel's Otis Buster 2 on Discord. Beat me in the final for the Draft League. I'll always hype up Draft League. Absolutely crushed me in the last game. Everybody he had went off. It was glorious. I think it was like a 90 to 50 beatdown. Like, when you take a beatdown like that, you just got to acknowledge it. But big shout out to Aaron for winning the MLS or the Cup in our Draft League. Big thing. And then just a big shout out to our MLS crew. I know Skylar's here and James was in chat tonight. This game couldn't be what it was without them, and even though James isn't with MLS, he's still a part of the community, and Skylar's going to be with us for a long time, I know. And just a huge thank you to those guys. The game wouldn't be what it is without them, and just appreciate those two.
And Skylar.
Yeah, I've got to plug the MLS Fantasy Elite League that I've run the past couple of years. It's basically like a private cash league, I guess you could say, $25 buy-in. And we've had some heavy hitters in there the past couple of years. It's super competitive, a lot of fun. So I've got to give a shout out to Garth Butchers, won it. I think he's in Discord. I know a handful of other guys, several guys from Discord. Max Ferre, Loon Juice, X Ward was up there most of the season. So it was a lot of fun. I've got some prizes coming your way, guys. Those hopefully will go out this week. I've been pretty busy kind of closing out everything with MLS and everything, but finally got some time to jump on that. And yeah, hopefully we'll run it back again next year. So kind of keep an eye out for that. If anybody wasn't involved this season, should be running it back again next year. And then, thanks for having me on again, Reed. And thanks for obviously everything that you do. I mean, it's a huge part of what keeps the community going. Just the show every week, Blaine, Ashley, all the guests. I mean, all of you guys, everybody's does their part. Like I said earlier, just the entire community kind of coming together, doing their thing. And so, I mean, even, Ryan, your bit of clean sheet info that I'm hounding while I'm doing my rankings, all that's helpful. Ranch, you over there in my ear, like, hey man, you got to add this guy. This dude's missing. This is a huge asset, man. Everybody coming together. I love it. So keep on doing what you're doing, guys, and we'll keep this thing running.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And of course, the last one I wanted to say is we have to give a special thanks to Ashley, who joined us this season as our new co-host with MLS Fantasy Insider. Came in, replaced Mike. It's been so fun having you, and to thank to your family for letting you do all this and all the fun stuff. So all the ups and downs.
Big fans of the show. Those two guys.
It's been, and they've got some swag to show off now, so
Yeah, they do.
we can have that. So, as far as I know, the three of us will be back next year. But I just want to point that out that Ashley's been great having you in addition to the team and being such a visible part of the community for so long. So, thank you so much, everyone, for listening tonight. Again, it's been a great 2021, and 2022 is just around the corner. Happy holidays to everyone. Be safe and enjoy MLS Cup. And of course, what could I end the show without saying? Good luck.